So we've heard the story, if a tree falls in a forest, does it really make a sound? Well, in the workplace, if it's not documented, did it really happen? Well, we're going to talk about that coming up next. Welcome everyone to another episode of Leadership Roll Call. I'm your host, Michael Finley. Our topic today is documentation. Now, we all hear about documentation. We hear that we need to document. Oh, that needs to be documented. Do you have any documentation on that? What about this? Now, do we really understand why we need to document, or what we need to document, or even how we need to document? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So first, let's talk about why we need to document. Well, to put it bluntly, we need to document to cover our rear end. We need to make sure that we're not going to get in trouble because we did not understand what was going on or we did something wrong. So we need to document basically to cover our rear end. Now, there's a lot of other reasons why we need to document. It helps keep us organized and it clarifies communication and things like that. But the basic reason is we need to cover our rear end, which is first and foremost our number one job, right? So next, let's talk about when we need to document. Well, first we need to document when we want to comment on one of our employees' performance or behavior. So this could be their lack of performance on a particular job, or a violation of a policy, or even they've done something very well. We want to comment on that, so we need to provide some sort of documentation on that. Now, what this does in the long run is it helps us spot trends in their behavior, but it also helps document if they've done something very well. It helps document things that they've done well, and it helps us during performance evaluations as well. So by documenting on things like this, so if we have to take extra action, extra corrective action, so we say we need to terminate an employee, we have the facts chronologically laid out of what they've done. Documentation helps prevent lawsuits, and it also helps us win some lawsuits as well. Next, we want to document when our boss asks us to do something. Now, I'm not suggesting keeping a secret file on your boss, but if your boss asks you to do something, especially if it's something very technical or complicated, we want to document what our boss asked us to do. So down the road, if our boss is, mad at us for allegedly not doing something right or doing something wrong or not doing something at all, we can go back to our notes and say, this is what I understood to be at the time. So if our boss gives us something, a specific task to do, we want to document that task. Conversely, we want to document if we ask our direct employees to do something. So especially if it's complicated or very technical. So we can do this by having a meeting with our employee and following it up with an email saying, just to clarify, these are the things I need you to do, and I need you to do X, Y, and Z, by such and such time. So this helps clarify communication and prevents confusion down the road. Next, you might also want to document significant meetings, so make some meeting notes, especially if you are asked to do something. So I'm not saying document every meeting that you attend, but you might want to jot down some notes of a significant meeting that you attend, and especially some action items that you were involved in. And lastly, you may want to document an important phone call. Now, how do you document a phone call? Well, it's pretty easy. Once you're done with the phone call, write out an email to the person you just talked to, and just say, hey, thank you very much for the phone call. It's my understanding. This is what we talked about. It's my understanding of what I need to do, what you need to do, et cetera, et cetera. So it helps us to document a significant phone call as well. Okay, so we know when we need to document, but what does it need to say? Well, first and foremost, it needs to have a time on it. It needs to have a date on it. So you don't want to say, 6 months ago this happened or 3 months ago this happened. So you want to document the time and the date of when a particular incident happened. Next, you want to be specific about what happened. You don't want to say Bob came in late last week. You want to say on Wednesday, April 16th, Bob showed up at 10 a.m. and he was supposed to be here at 8 a.m. So you want to be as specific as possible. Next, you want to be accurate and you want to be factual. So you want to be accurate to make sure that you get exactly down what was said or not said. And then you want to be factual. You don't want to have your own opinion in there. You don't want to be judging the person that you're documenting. So it needs to be factual. And lastly, it needs to be consistent with all your employees. If Bob shows up late, and Susie shows up late, you need to document both incidents. Okay, so how do I document? Well, there's a tried and true form, and that's a handwritten letter, right? So take a sheet of paper, write down the date, write down the specifics, write down the accurate and true information of what happened, and put it in a file somewhere. That's the old way of doing things, and it still works to this day. Another way you can do it is send an email to yourself. So not only will this help because it has a timestamp on it, but you can also file it away in a file on your computer. So that always helps. We also want to make sure the documentation, regardless of what format it's in, we want to make sure the document has good grammar, has good language, has good punctuation, and is professional. You never know who is going to see this documentation down the road. It could show up in court. So we want to make sure it's professional. And again, don't give opinion, don't give judgments, don't use bad grammar, don't use cuss words, anything like that. Make sure that the documentation is professional because you never know who might see it. And lastly, you want to make sure that the documentation is secure. Now, if it's a handwritten note, put it in a file in a locked drawer. If it is an email, make sure it is in a file on a secure server. Don't put it on a shared drive. Make sure it is on a secured server. So to sum up, we want to document anything of significance, anything that we need to reference later on down the road. This could be employees' conduct, it could be what our boss asks us to do, it could be what we tell our employees to do, it could be significant meeting notes or significant phone calls. But we want to document anything that we need to possibly reference down the road. So the question of the day, do you have a story of someone that did not document or documented poorly of an incident and it came back to bite them? I'd like to hear about it. Please put it in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. So I hope this short overview of documentation was beneficial to you. I look forward to talking to you next week. Take care.